All right, we do have Trey Yingst live now in Kyiv. Trey, if you can hear me, tell me what you're seeing on the ground and talk to us about the resistance that you're seeing.
Yeah, so tonight we've heard a number of air raid sirens going off, and it is indicative of what could come in the next few minutes even. Also, the hotel warning us to go into shelters because there's intelligence that officials here in Kyiv have, and they say there are going to be Russian strikes on this city tonight. We've seen a very resilient population, a population that says they will pick up arms and fight. Police stations all over the city today handing out weapons to civilians who plan to fight alongside the armed forces. We were in the streets of Kyiv today talking with those civilians and getting a look at the aftermath of street battles that took place last night and the aftermath of an apartment complex that took a direct hit from a Russian missile. Take a look at that scene. Overnight, fierce fighting erupted between the Ukrainian army and Russian forces in the streets of Kyiv. This truck is riddled with bullet holes, and there's blood on the sidewalk. This morning, a Russian missile slammed into this building in the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv. This gives you a sense of the destruction that these weapons can cause. Right now, Ukraine is appealing to the international community to send air defense systems as their country is under attack. Again, at this hour, officials in Kyiv issued a unique alert, different from the normal sirens that go off in this city when there are air bombardments targeting the population here. This going out to everyone to get underground immediately. We have seen these alerts before, and minutes later, Russian bombardment begins. So everyone has to take this very seriously because, as you saw, the aftermath of that missile strike, people are dying. There is blood in the streets of this capital and across this country amid a Russian invasion. And just miles from where we are standing, there are Russian troops trying to make their way into this capital city and take over. Back to you.
Trey, we know that there are so many people right now, thousands that are fleeing, and the UNHCR predicts that there could be up to 4 million people that will flee the country. Can you tell us about those folks that you've seen underground taking shelter, the ones that can't leave? They can't afford to leave.
I describe it to you like this. Imagine someone comes to your door and they say you have to get underground immediately. There's going to be a bombing campaign against your city. What do you grab? And that's exactly the thought process of these civilians that we spoke with. They had to go through this. So when we went to the Kyiv metro underground to speak with these individuals, they had with them their pets, their children, and just maybe a bag, something they could grab quickly, and they have been living there on any supplies they could bring with them because they are worried their homes are going to be destroyed, much like that apartment building that we saw earlier today. And those who are not underground, hiding right now, fearing for their lives, are preparing for those Russian troops to enter the city. They're doing everything that they can, from building Molotov cocktails, and they are really just getting instructions, sometimes from the television or the internet, to do that. Some others tell us they're grabbing knives, preparing to do everything they can simply to kill Russian troops who enter their city. They understand this is an invasion of the Ukrainian sovereignty. This is the nightmare scenario that was warned about, but not the most likely outcome. And it's taking place right now. And so civilians here are preparing everything that they can. And those who can't prepare are literally in churches behind us praying for a safe and peaceful outcome.
Wow.
Yeah, Trey, Sean Duffy here. You know, it's interesting, the spirit and the will of the Ukrainian people, and they're passing out guns, and they're ready to fight when Russia comes to the streets, but those guns don't do anything against the tanks. And so is the Ukrainian military armed with anti-tank missiles to take out those tanks should they come into the city? Or no, is Ukraine just stuck with the arms that are being passed out to the civilians?
They have a number of anti-tank Javelin missiles, many of them from the Americans that were given to the Ukrainians before this started. And they're actually requesting some more of these anti-tank missiles because they are so successful in hitting Russian troops as they enter this country. The Ukrainian Defense Ministry says they have been extremely successful in hitting troops as they come across the border in different convoys. They're also looking for anti-aircraft batteries. We've seen a number of helicopters and planes shot down by the Ukrainian forces, and so far a big topic of conversation here among officials has to do with air superiority. The Russians have not been able to completely control the airspace, despite the fact that their air force is nearly 10 times the size of the Ukrainian air force. And we've seen a lot of Russian propaganda claiming they have taken out every air defense battery in this country, but it's not true. We've also seen, since that statement came out from the Russians, different planes and helicopters shot down. So the Ukrainians are bringing a fierce battle in the air and on the ground, and they are appealing at this hour and today to the international community to get more weapons and air defense systems into the country. The big question is how they're going to do that. The airspace is shut down right now. They do have neighboring countries they could bring convoys of weaponry over with, but we are in the middle of an active war zone right now, and it will be extremely difficult to do that.
Trey, Katie Pavlich here. Great to hear from you and see what you're doing there on the ground. You're there among the people, as you said, who are in subway stations, in bomb shelters. Can you talk about the fact that the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, stayed in the capital, did not flee, and has been going out into the streets each day with video to say, I'm still here, our people are fighting, and how much impact that has had on the civilians who were there fighting back against the threat of Russian tanks and the air power, as you mentioned, that is 10 times bigger than what the Ukrainians have right now.
Yeah, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has pledged to stay in the capital of Kyiv and fight back against the Russians as they enter this city. And he understands he is the #1 target for Russian forces who, according to the American intelligence officials who provided information to the United Nations, they have a list of people that they will kill or capture when they enter this city. And Zelensky knows that he is at the top of that list, but he is pledging to stay. And so this is really boosting the morale of the population here because they see that their leader is not fleeing. We have covered conflicts around the world where leaders have immediately fled the country when they understand they could be captured or killed. Zelensky's not doing that, and neither is the mayor of Kyiv and other top officials. We talked to a member of parliament yesterday, and he brought with him an AK, and he said, I just picked this up from the police station. They were handing them out like candy. And I asked him what he planned to do today, and he said, I'm going to the front lines, and I'm going to fight the Russians. This is a member of the Ukrainian parliament, and he's not the only one. So that gives you a sense of the unity that the population here has. Those who have the ability to flee and the resources to leave this country aren't doing so. They're digging their heels in, they're loading their weapons, and they're preparing to fight.
Trey, I saw a report on Twitter. It's kind of an anecdote, I guess, but a pizza place was giving a free pizza to anyone that came in, showing they had armed themselves. But we talk about people hiding in bomb shelters and in the metro. What about the life-sustaining things like grocery stores and hospitals and emergency rooms? Are those still operating? Is there efforts to take that underground? Is there a possibility of a food shortage, not enough doctors to take care of the population that's in hiding?
It's a great question. As we walked the streets of Kyiv today, we saw lines down the block in front of the few grocery stores that were open. There's a real panic that people aren't going to be able to get supplies amid this conflict. The same thing at gas stations. Only a few of them were open. Some of them have actually been converted to military-only gas stations because they want to reserve the fuel for the forces who are going to fight back against the Russians. But right now, the entire city is under a curfew until Monday morning. Originally, the curfew had just been in place at night, but the mayor extended it until Monday at 8 a.m., knowing that the Russians would again attempt to take this city. So people are stuck with the supplies that they have, and there is a real possibility and a real understanding here that as Russian forces start to surround this capital of nearly 3 million people, they are already choking off the lifelines to the city. So things like food and other resources like fuel will increasingly become more scarce. And as we know from covering wars around the world, it changes the environment. Things are much more tense when you can't feed your family. And how that plays out here, we will see. But there's also a real understanding here that everyone from age 18 to 60 is going to fight the Russians by law, actually, because a general mobilization order is in place for all men in that age range. And people want to defend their families. They're willing to, again, do it with anything that they have. If they don't have a gun, we have been told people are picking up knives, and they're literally bracing for these troops to enter their city. And I saw another report today. You mentioned the pizza shop. I saw another report of a brewery here in Ukraine that is converted to a Molotov cocktail factory. They're basically using the bottles to make Molotov cocktails and prepare their community to fight the Russians any way they can.
Yeah. Incredible reporting and analysis, Trey. Thank you so much. Please stay safe out there.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.